All right, welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. I, of course, am your host, Nick, joined by our friend Ben Jacobs for what is going to be our last transfer special of the summer, surprisingly. If you are new, Ben's been with us all summer doing all sorts of fun transfer updates, and this is probably going to be the most fast and furious one yet. And if you are returning, Dan and I will be back on Friday, I guess evening Eastern time, to do kind of a window wrap up live on YouTube. So we will, between this episode and the live episode, kind of hopefully get everything covered off on for the summer. So we're going to dive right in. It's just over 2 days until the end of the window, and Chelsea have, as Ben and I were just saying before the episode started, a million things to do. Plus a little bit on Chelsea's next couple of matches and the start of the season so far. But of course, call to actions. If you are able to, this would be really great, especially for this episode. Share this with your Chelsea curious friend. That would be amazing. The more people that share these episodes out with their friends, the wider it gets seen, thanks to these damn algorithms. So that'd be great. Of course, if you want to leave a 5-star review, that would be amazing. Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Subscribing on YouTube would help us a lot. We're over 35,000 there now, doing some YouTube specific content, so you want to head over there. Sam is writing a wonderful series of Discords this year, which are our free newsletters, so get stuck in on those. Our dispatches are the newsletters. Discord is where you can hang out with our like-minded friends, Chelsea friends. So a lot going on here. We're just going to dive right into the thing that I think people are most eager to talk about, Ben, and this is all the remaining ins that might happen from a transfer perspective, who might be coming to Chelsea. And then the middle section will be dedicated to the 30 or 40 people still on the list to leave. And then the end will be a little bit about the season so far. But let's dive right in. It's kind of been a crazy last week or so. Ben, how are you? Just broad strokes here about the end of the window itself. It feels like Chelsea did a bunch of business early, some kind of futures we're trading stocks, and now it feels like we're in kind of crunch time for some of the more established sorts of players. I'm talking strikers, wingers, maybe anything else. So let's start with striker. Victor Osimhen's been the name on everyone's tongue all summer. What's the latest on Victor Osimhen as it stands right now?
Yeah, I think broadly it's a case of incomings equals opportunism, outgoings equals urgency, and we'll dive into each of them in a bit more detail. With Victor Osimhen, I preface this because it's Wednesday at 2:00 UK, and at this stage of the window, things are changing by the second. But Victor Osimhen is Chelsea's top target. There's no denying that. Yes, there are other options. We can talk about Ivan Toney. And right now, there's a sort of battle between Chelsea and Al Ahly, the Saudi club, but also almost a political battle in football terms, of course, between Chelsea and Napoli and Chelsea and Osimhen. So the Chelsea tactic is get Osimhen to buy in, not to a specific number necessarily, but a structure. So they're not saying, okay, we're only going to pay you X. They're saying to Victor Osimhen, you can have what you want, but you've got to earn it in terms of individual achievements and team achievements. And you've got to take what you want and knock about 25% off it because we're in a season without Champions League football. If they get the buy-in from Osimhen, they'll go to Napoli. And the expectation from Napoli is there will be a bid. And that bid may well be permanent. And now this 65 million euros number, plus maybe some add-ons, is out there. It could be feasible for Chelsea if they get the buy-in from Osimhen. But there's complications. Time is one of them. It's running out. The fact the Saudis could just wait and then after the window shuts, still have the option to return to Victor Osimhen, wage, agent fees, a lot of games going on. Now, the latest reports out of Italy say that Al Ahly are upping their offer. I'm told at the time of recording, nothing has changed yet on the Saudi side. And remember what I said before. Al Ahly and the central deal makers don't really have to do that much right now. They can improve the terms to Osimhen And nobody's saying they won't, because they gave him 3 offers in about 3 days that went up and up and up 12 months ago when the club was Al Hilal. But club-to-club negotiations, Al Ahly are basically there with Napoli. They don't need to up anything. But Napoli can say that that's what they're going to do in the hope that Chelsea move. And right now, it's a fluid situation. Chelsea would love to sign Osimhen, but only on their terms. And if it's not to be, as I said before, they do have other targets.
Well, let's talk about, I think since the last time we spoke, there's one less team in the Osimhen sweepstakes, and that was PSG that decided to kind of opt out of the proceedings. So it's, as you mentioned, it's Al Ahly saying, we're not going to bet against ourselves here. We're not just going to naturally increase an offer and come to a further agreement. If there is still hesitancy from the player side to go to Saudi Arabia right now, as a I think his agent said multiple times he has unfinished business in Europe. This just becomes kind of Chelsea's most favorable positioning that we've had all summer, right? Which is, there's one bid on the table that the player's not keen on. Napoli is buying talent already that surely they have to, sell Osimhen to kind of make up for. And the player has kind of run out of like multiple options that they're interested in. I'm not asking you to predict the future. I'm asking you to give me an odds out of 10 that this gets done before the end of the window. What are your odds out of 10?
Yeah, I don't think we want to put odds on it, only because it's changing so quickly. So if we were to say now, it's genuinely a 50-50 deal. It's a 5 out of 10 chance. On the Napoli side, there is a 9 out of 10 chance, I would say, that a package can now be agreed, but it needs Osimhen buy-in. And right now, they haven't agreed terms. Let's see whether that develops in the coming days. That's not me sitting on the fence. It's responsible journalism to not be saying, I think that it now has an X% chance of happening, because they're literally in the room at the time we're recording. So that's an important point in all of this. Then let's not forget the third option in all of this, which is Victor Osimhen stays at Napoli. And it's not what Napoli want, because when he extended, they paid him a higher wage, and they can't really afford to keep paying him. And Romelu Lukaku, subject to a medical, is due to come in. But that is a scenario where Osimhen says, I'll sit tight after the window. We might find this at Chelsea with 1 or 2 players. This freezing out idea can change, because you have to confront the reality that your players can't anymore go to the clubs maybe that they want. So maybe a player that was part of the developmental squad or not with the first team comes back into the fold, and you have to deal with that. And then the last point, which is quite interesting with Saudi and all of this, which I think gives them a slight advantage if there's an impasse, is if Osimhen and his agent want to go down the money route, want to go down the Saudi route, it may be the compromise from Al Ahly is actually on agreeing to a shorter-term contract or a long-term contract with a release clause that kicks in either in 12 months or 24 months. And then Napoli are delighted, because they'll get a sell-on. So it won't just be 65 million plus add-ons. It will be 65 million plus add-ons up to 70 plus a sell-on. And if you know that that release clause is set at market value, like with Christopher Nkunku, like with Benjamin Sesko for next summer, then Osimhen will basically feel like he's not, ironically, because he's been so against temporary, he's not going to Saudi Arabia permanently. He's signing a permanent deal in Saudi Arabia with an out. And if that release clause at market value is given, then Osimhen may go and do a year of the money. It will be astronomical, because if you don't stay for 2 years, it's not tax-free. So he'll want even more money, knowing that he'll have to pay tax on it. He'll come back. Napoli will get more money because there'll be a sell-on clause. Osimhen will get more money compared to Chelsea or staying at Napoli. And that might be something to watch out for if Chelsea don't succeed after the window shuts, because suddenly then everyone's terms change a little bit. So right now, Chelsea have got a bit of the cards, because they know Napoli want to sell, and they also know that Osimhen would rather stay in Europe. But give it 48 hours, and Chelsea might turn to another target, and then suddenly Napoli may panic and come crawling back to Chelsea in the final hours of the window, or Al Ahly might become the dominant party in all of this and feel that they can get it done. So Toney, Osimhen could be intertwined for Chelsea or for Al Ahly. there's games, there's politics. So trust me, at the time we're recording anyway, be cautious on this one. Don't believe everything that you see and read. Of course, trust me 100%, because I'm always going to give you, on London is Blue, the most balanced possible view I can. But there are games at play, and I can promise you that, which does make it very difficult to cover as a journalist, which is why I'm trying to give you the full context here.
No, it's super helpful. And I think the other question I have for you is between the wage conversation, which has seemed to be a blocker for a lot of the summer, and the fee conversation, which one of those is more difficult to navigate? Is the wage conversation or the fee conversation?
No, the fee's easy at this point. I think if Osimhen says yes, then it will be done extremely quickly with Napoli. The price is out there, 65 million. Loan with obligation, loan with option into obligation, or transfer fee. It's all going to lead to the same end, assuming that with that first point and loan, Osimhen says no way. So if it's anything with an option or an obligation, or alternatively a permanent sale now, that ballpark of 50% of the release clause has been put out there. So it's very, very unlikely the price is now going to be 80, 90, 100 million. And Chelsea would see that as market value. And Osimhen has no issue moving permanently. And therefore, the Napoli negotiations will be smooth if they get to that point. And as I reported yesterday, Napoli are still anticipating a bid from Chelsea. The hard part is the terms, and Chelsea are clear. This is not about, like I said earlier, a massive number. This is about a structure. And there is a difference.
The incentives, within that structure, right? That you can earn whatever you want, but you really have to go achieve it. You have to go perform, because we can't do the Raheem Sterling thing all over again, right?
Yes, but people are wrongly assuming that somehow Chelsea won't pay 250,000 a week or more, and Victor Osimhen wants that number, and that's that if he doesn't come down on wage. Whereas my understanding is that if Osimhen wanted above 250,000, it would be under consideration from Chelsea. So they're not capping what he can earn. They're saying you got to earn it on the field, and so does the team. So in a permanent deal, they may say, okay, and again, we're just using 250,000 as a guide. That's your number that you want as base. But in your first year on a long-term contract, there's no Champions League. And all new signings have got a UCL reduction of 20 to 25%. So immediately, and I'm only using 20 because my maths is better at 20 than 25 off the top of my head without getting a calculator out, we deduct 20 from 250,000. And therefore, the wage goes from 250,000 a week to 200,000 a week. Then they may say, okay, we need you to come down a bit more unless you score 10 goals, or unless the team finish in the top half, or unless the team qualify for Europe, or unless other things like Club World Cup success or silverware happen. But if X, Y, and Z happen, then you actually might end up with, hypothetically, 300,000. So it's not as simple as this. And I want to make that clear. But just for the sake of layman's terms, what if you had a scenario where you go down 25% as a default, but it's restored for every year of your contract where there is Champions League football? And what if after that, you can actually go up 25% if another series of things happen? And that is the sort of scaled model that Chelsea are looking at. So it's not correct to say they're not going to pay Osimhen what he wants. He just has to earn it.
Yeah, and by proxy, the club has to reach the goals that they've stated that they, want to reach because of the total contributions of all the players on the playing staff. And I think that's an interesting point. We will tackle the rest of the incomings coming up after the ad break. But of course, if you're sticking around on YouTube, the stash is back, and we will be back right after the break. Thanks to the sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, Ben, you briefly mentioned Ivan Toney. It feels like that is definitely a secondary target right now, but is there any news on Ivan Toney that we should be thinking about as we proceed toward the last 2 days of the window, knowing that we are recording this on Wednesday at 2:30 Eastern, 2:30 UK time? What's kind of the scenario here for Toney? Is it like Victor Osimhen, I should say? He just says no on wages. There's nothing to be done with Napoli, and then Chelsea turn to Toney, or are they working both deals at the same time because they're not going to be caught out?
Victorman, I like it. It's a bit like Netflix. They're going to go out there and sign Osimhen and Toney, and they're going to be called Victorman. Ivan plus Victor. You've started something.
I don't like either one of those, Ben. I'll be honest with you.
So Netflix is clever, by the way, I think. So kudos to that. But anyway, Ivan Toney, the Brentford preference would actually be at this stage to have a Premier League suitor because they feel their valuation will be hit. Whereas their fear is that if Toney stays, they lose him on a free, unless, of course, there's a modest fee in January. And from Al Ahly's point of view, if Chelsea don't come in, they can again wait until after the European window closes and say to Brentford, well, you've now got to meet our 35 or 40 million valuation instead of 50. So all Premier League suitors are welcome. And this is why I think we're hearing Toney to Manchester United, to an extent Toney to Chelsea. Is drumming up competitive tension. And Ivan Toney would welcome a move from Chelsea. I wouldn't ever call any footballer a backup because otherwise you'd have to say Cole Palmer was a backup to Michael Olise 12 months ago. You just have a deep list of targets and your strength in recruitment is actually saying, great, they're all really good. It's like if you do a job interview and you shortlist 4, you may say, I really like all 4 and I can barely choose between any of them, but you've still got to pick one. And that's kind of how recruitment should work as well, rather than saying, oh, we missed out on number 1, now number 2, now number 3, because then the player may feel devalued. And imagine if Ivan Toney's got more than one offer, he might be like, Chelsea didn't want me. Chelsea didn't try hard enough for me. Chelsea was stringing me along whilst they were trying for Osimhen. So backup is the easy way of putting it. And it's definitely true that the priority right now is resolving Osimhen one way or the other. But Toney could be there and Chelsea could escalate that. As we're recording this, again, Wednesday, no bid yet from Chelsea. But things are going to have to move fast one way or the other. Toney had always been denied by Chelsea sources for months and months and months that they didn't necessarily want to go in that direction. But the end of the window does various things and you can change your mind on these type of deals. But right now, the only personal term agreements are between Al Ahly and Ivan Toney. And remember, Al Ahly are also in the conversation for Victor Osimhen. And at the same time, you don't have any agreement with Brentford. So as I exclusively revealed, the Al Ahly bid was rejected for 35 million. Chelsea haven't yet made a bid. So if we're trying to read into this, there might be a realistic chance where one of Al Ahly and Chelsea get Osimhen and then the other turns their attention to Toney. And Al Ahly know that the terms are acceptable to Toney. So if they go in that direction, they are optimistic that he might actually leave for Saudi Arabia. And one of the reasons why is because Brentford are pressuring him and saying, look, you don't have an option just to stay here and sit it out. We don't want that scenario. We want to cash in on you now. But it's very easy to read it now and forget that point I made earlier, which is when the window shuts, clubs that say one thing do another. PSG told Mbappe he wasn't part of the pre-season tour and they wanted to sell him. And then Nasser Al-Khalifi and Mbappe made up. And then he still ended up leaving on a free transfer. So key point as well for Chelsea. Everyone will look at now and say, well, the player will be forced out. Chalobah will leave because what other option does he have? He's training with the developmental squad. But when the window shuts, everyone at Chelsea has to be fair and look after who is still there. And that might be the same with Toney, that even though Brentford are saying, you've got one choice at the moment, Al Ahly, take it, we want to sell you, we'll agree a fee with them. If Chelsea come in, even better, we get a bidding war, go to Chelsea, go to Al Ahly, but go, we want to sell you. But if that window shuts, then Toney may just feel like, actually, the day after the window shuts, he'll be back in the fold, he'll be back playing, and then he's got his way, which has always been a possibility to Toney, to enter into free agency, feeling like as a free agent in 12 months' time, a top club may make a more lucrative proposal to him because there's that lack of transfer fee. So again, we can't rule out Chelsea, but right now, my sense anyway, is if they had to pick between Toney and Osimhen, their top priority would be Osimhen.
Yep. Are there any other striker targets on the market for Chelsea, or any other targets to come in general before we shift to the outgoings? I think doing some rapid fire here would be fun.
Yeah, I think we have the possibility of John Duran still, but it's on the back burner, and Villa's valuation is still 40 million. I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin is not advanced in any way. There's a neat theory that Broja finally goes to Everton instead of Ipswich, and then Dominic Calvert-Lewin comes the other way. I'm not so sure at this point. I think Toney would be more likely. And even though Everton would sell Dominic Calvert-Lewin, there's no indication yet that Chelsea are going in that direction. But the window can do weird things. He's certainly been discussed internally. And then we still know they reached out for Jonathan David many months ago. It's not advanced. I'm really, really surprised at 25 million that David hasn't gone anywhere yet. So let's see if there's any late movement there. But these are like back burner targets in that same bracket as Evan Ferguson that Chelsea have discussed. But right now, they're not moving in any meaningful direction. And it looks like they're putting all their efforts on Osimhen. And it appears that Toney could be a viable backup, providing as well with him the wage fits into the structure. Yep. And then Sancho is obviously the other one. And if there is opportunism to be done between Manchester United and Chelsea, and they have held exploratory discussions, that might be a possibility where Sterling goes to Manchester United. It's difficult. We'll come on to that in the outgoings. And Sancho, in a move driven by Joe Shields and, of course, backed by the recruitment team, could come the other way. But it's an if. So you have Juventus, who have actually made an offer for Sancho, and you have Chelsea, who have just had a conversation about Sancho. And it's important at this stage anyway to differentiate between concrete bid and hypothetical might suit all parties swap/2 separate deals.
The old swap/2 separate deals. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one, right? Because Chelsea are not short of attacking players right now. What is your sense of why they would do that swap with United when there is possibly a gap in midfield that needs to be solved from a profile perspective first?
Yeah, I think the gap in midfield just may come over time. There's midfielders to arrive as well. And the midfield's a strange one because you could say, okay, my starting premise is that Enzo Fernandez, Romeo Lavia, Moises Caicedo are all going to play. And then you're like, yikes, Cole Palmer. And then you look at Wolves and you say, when Palmer played as that advanced eight and Noni Madueke was on the right, he can be classified as a central midfielder, and Kunku can be classified as a central midfielder. Esteval Willian is coming in. Joao Felix can play central as well. So I would say actually they're not short of a midfield profile. It's just my opinion. Others may disagree, and I'd love to hear your counterpoints on it.
They're short of a six, I should say, not an attacking midfield.
Yeah, but if you go with the logic I've said, and I appreciate that Palmer could be part of the front line, Enzo could be advanced, and then maybe there is a gap to bring in another six. But if you go with how I've described it, then actually you're saying Enzo's going to be deeper because of Cole Palmer or Nkunku or Kiernan Dewsbury Hall or Carney Chukwuemeka if he stays. So then you've got Enzo, you've got Lavia, you've got Caicedo, you've got Leslie Okechukwu to come back from Southampton. And in addition to that, Andre Santos can kind of play everywhere in midfield too. So it may be they don't feel the need to strengthen in that sixth position. You've also got Renato Vega, who can go and play in defensive midfield too. That's another option. We've not seen much of him. But here's my theory on Vega. And I know it's a bit left field. I suspect if Reece James is fit, you got Mark Cucurella, number one left back. And then what we saw in pre-season is Malo Gusto move to the left. And I think he's number two, the backup left back, which is strange because he's also the backup right back. And based on his form in the back end of last season, he deserves maybe even some starts. But I think you'll see Gusto move to the left and deputise for Cucurella. And that might mean that Vega on the bench can be brought on in a capacity where he is actually a defensive midfielder and is used in that capacity as a backup too, which is why I think there's a possibility at least that we might see Chelsea not add another 6 at this stage.
Any surprise candidates to come in, or are we good on the incomings? Largely striker and potentially winger.
Yeah, I think Sancho is opportunistic. Striker's the main priority. I don't want to say off, but I'd be surprised, or I'd call it very much 50-50 if Gabriel Meck gets over the line now. Mike Penders, we know, is done. But I'm told nothing's really moved on the Meck front at this point. So I think we are probably looking at a maximum of 2, which I believe would take the senior summer signings, if you include Esteval and Alan Selmino, to 14. And I think that 2 more will be the max. Winger, if there's opportunism, and striker as priority.
Well, to do 16 signings, you have to get rid of roughly 130 people. And so I think that's going to be our priority right after our final ad break. Ben, we will be right back to talk about the outgoings. Thanks to sponsors, and we will be right back. All right. We got to run through a hefty list of of outs here. And thanks to our buddy Parth for putting out the kind of list as it stands as of yesterday. You have goalkeepers to discuss, which are fun. You have defensive players, midfielders, and attackers. You also have some academy folks in here as well, Ben. So let's just kind of start from the top and rapid fire our way down. It feels like Kepa is basically done to Bournemouth at this point. So can we put him on the officially out list?
Yeah, I think the deal with Bournemouth will be done. Kepa's agreed an extension until 2026, and that fits him into the new wage structure and has a reduction, which makes it feasible for Bournemouth. And this is a deal that I was told was done at the Bournemouth game against Newcastle, where after the game, Chelsea and Bournemouth met through agent brokers, I'm told, and ironed out this deal in principle. And then even though there were still some parts that needed negotiation, and the stumbling block was the Kepa Chelsea part, was he prepared to extend? Was he prepared to take a new wage? So that part was still a long way off. But the desire to get it done with Bournemouth was there. And now the medical, I believe, is done at the time of recording. And this one should be announced within the next 12 or 24 hours. So yes, Kepa to Bournemouth we can construe as done.
What about old Georgi Petrovic? There's not been a whole lot going on with him this summer. He is now ostensibly 3rd or 4th choice, given the addition of Philip Jorgensen. What's the future for old Georgie here?
Yeah, Petrovic could stay and is quite content to if he needs to and try and fight for his place and hope that he gets some game time. The Chelsea preference was to send him on loan to Strasbourg, and they keep open a loan spot by signing Mike Penders on a pre-agreed deal. So there was some confusion on that one, but Penders is a 17 million signing who is for 2025, 2026.
For next year, so it doesn't.
And therefore it's not like Georgi Mamardashvili to Liverpool where it's signed and loaned back. It's just staying despite the original wording. And then as a consequence, they can still keep open an extra loan spot internationally. Yep. And Strasbourg Petrovic is what Chelsea want. They want him to be playing at that level. They want him to be learning the style, because obviously Strasbourg's style will reflect Enzo Maresca's possession-heavy philosophy. But Petrovic isn't so sure at this point. And as you can imagine, he backs himself and his own talent to change Maresca's mind. So there's plenty of options for him, and there's a bit of a goalkeeper merry-go-round. Like, I think Southampton are one to watch for Petrovic if they don't get Ramsdale over the line. And although talks have reopened for Ramsdale and Southampton, and that's the priority, if they fail in that, and I think we have to wait and see. Some sources say the Ramsdale one will eventually get done now to Southampton. Others believe it's not as advanced at the time of recording as is being intimated. So maybe Southampton have a backup, and Petrovic is also a name that they consider. But if he has to stay, then I don't think all parties will feel it's a disaster because unlike Kepa, it doesn't need resolving as urgently. The wages are not as high, but Chelsea believe that Petrovic needs game time. So they're not saying to Petrovic, off you go on a permanent sale, although at the right offer, they would be open to that. And we know that he was offered to Genoa and Fiorentina before they brought in David De Gea. But Chelsea are also saying, okay, we can develop you elsewhere. We can get you the minutes elsewhere because you're not going to get that minutes at Chelsea in this campaign. And then if you impress us, we'll reconsider it in 12 months. But it needs buy-in from Petrovic to feel like that's best for him. Whereas right now, because you train with goalkeepers in fours, regardless of only maybe two on the bench, regardless of others being ahead of him in the pecking order and Philip Jorgensen coming in, I think Petrovic's mentality, which we sometimes forget with footballers, is, well, 80, 90% of my week is just training at Cobham. And if I'm going to be part of the group, and if I'm going to be in that four of goalkeepers training because of the even number, I just might change Maresca's mind. And he's that kind of character that might just adapt and force his way back into the reckoning in the same way that under Pochettino, he was able to keep Robert Sanchez out of the side. So the player's going to play a big role in this. Is he prepared to go or is he going to be picky? And I think unlike Kepa, who just wanted game time and a resolution, I think Petrovic is going to be a bit more like Chalobah, where if the right opportunity doesn't present himself, then he will just stay at Chelsea.
I mean, let's move to Trev since we have a hefty list to get through here. It seems to be either him or Axel Disasi leaves in this window. Is that your feeling as well, or is there another like Benoit Badiashile that could still go out as well?
No, I don't think Badiashile. I think that with Axel Disasi, Newcastle have kind of replaced him as a possible backup to Mark Gahey, but I still think they're working quite aggressively on Gahey, and that one could get done. And if it does, then it might well be that Axel Disasi has to look elsewhere. We know that the sort of usual suspects looking to reinforce in this position, possibly Wolves, although nothing really advanced, definitely Crystal Palace and possibly Aston Villa, have all made what can be construed as cursory inquiries. But there's a merry-go-round really that's moving at the moment, and Chalobah's obviously part of that as well. Crystal Palace, again, like Chalobah. Fulham have looked at Chalobah in the past, but they've signed Joachim Andersen, so they're not pursuing him at the moment. Villa, and even Newcastle too. And I still think that we have to be quite cautious with Chalobah. One, because as I've said many times, he's on a long-term contract at Chelsea still until 2028. Two, because he's going to be picky. Three, because he backs himself to be back in the first team group if the window shuts. So the Chelsea position is you weren't on the tour to America and you're in the developmental squad because we don't want to give any false promises. We want to be very honest with you. But if the window shuts, then they'll have to find a solution. And Chalobah will probably be quite encouraged by the fact that Enzo Maresca has said very openly, no one's a guaranteed starter. Everyone's judged on how they train. And if Chalobah trains and plays like he did under Pochettino, he will get opportunities and he will be back in the first team fold. And I'm sure that that is still the player perspective. But in the next few days, Chelsea will be leaning on Chalobah. And I'm a little bit surprised because given his form and potential, at 25 or 30 million, how's nobody bid? That's the thing that surprises me. I can understand why no one's put down 30 million guaranteed right now for Broja. I can understand why Chilwell's got a big fee. I can understand why Sterling's difficult because of the wage situation. But I cannot understand why an in-form, likeable, proven Premier League player, and now a bit of a fan's favourite, is not somebody that anybody has yet bid with when Newcastle and Gahey is 70 million and Chalobah might only be 25 million. So let's wait and see how it develops. But I think the answer to that might be Chalobah saying, no, I'm not going to go and play for a club without European football. I don't desperately want to move far away from London. And this makes it a little bit more difficult. So if Newcastle don't get Gahey, maybe it is Disasi, but it also could be Tapsoba. Or, and again, this is what I mean about dominoes late in the window, if Trippier had a late exit, which is unlikely from Newcastle's point of view, but I can guarantee you if the right offer comes, the player will push. Then even though they've got Tino Livramento as their starting right back, they'll want cover. And then suddenly Chalobah being able to play centre-back or right-back becomes very viable. And again, from Palace's point of view, Lacroix, is the player that they're pushing for, but they've got to agree terms with the player. But if Gueye goes coupled with Anderson, they may push late in the window, more likely for Chalobah than Disasi, but all options are being explored. So we're sort of waiting at the moment on a bit of a domino effect, and I think that's delaying a resolution on the future of these Chelsea defenders. But mark my words, if the window shuts and Chalobah is still at Chelsea Football Club, I would be pretty surprised if he's still frozen out in the cold.
Which player is more likely to go at this point? Is it Disasi or is it Trev?
I don't think Chelsea can say, because like I said before, it's contingent on other clubs and outgoings, and those outgoings will define the kind of profile they're looking for. So right now, I would say probably Disasi, because more clubs are inquiring for him. But again, if a club suddenly needs a centre-back, right-back, they'll pivot and change their perspective. And this is why I think we have to be a little bit patient. And I think Chelsea are calm and braced for the fact that maybe not both of them do end up departing.
Another tricky one, and you mentioned United earlier, so I'll circle back on defense, is Ben Chilwell. In the frozen out group, is not a fit. Been pretty clear since the beginning, based on Maresca's comments, that this is not going to be a player that sees the field a whole lot this year. Is a tricky one to move due to wages, injuries, and I'm sure some sort of transfer fee. Is it United or bust for him?
No, I don't think so. I think if he's relying on Manchester United, he's going to be sorely disappointed, because as I reported yesterday, I'm not aware of anything between Manchester United and Ben Chilwell of note. Certainly not part of these Sancho-Sterling conversations, but Manchester United sources for weeks, not even in the last 24, 48 hours when new reports have broken, have firmly downplayed any interest in Ben Chilwell. So either that's a massive ruse and they're going to surprise everyone, or they're just not in for Ben Chilwell. And I think it's because the left-back position is something that Manchester United are looking for, either backup, temporary, or young. And I don't think Chilwell would want to join on a loan. I don't think Chilwell's the right kind of age. I don't think the numbers would add up. And everyone that I speak to in and around Manchester United tells me they'll be patient and maybe come in again in other windows for Milos Kirkos, who's younger and more the kind of profile they're looking for at Bournemouth. But right now, Bournemouth will not settle, even at 35, 40 million. So earlier in the window, it was thought that was what it would take. Now I'm told that actually it won't even be at that number. They'll just flat reject this late in the window. So I don't think Ben Chilwell and Manchester United has any legs. I don't think it's ever had any legs. I'm not disrespecting anyone else's reporting. I wouldn't be surprised if the parties have discussed it and understood the terms, because that's just what you do in the market. Even for players you're not going to proceed with, you find out what they cost and you use that intel to your advantage in and around other deals. But right now, if Ben Chilwell is sitting there thinking Manchester United is going to be my saviour, I think he's going to be sitting by the phone, and I don't expect it to ring between now and when the window shuts.
Is there a suitor for him out there that you've heard of?
I've honestly not heard of a suitor for Ben Chilwell, which again is a surprise, but it comes down to wage. It comes down to fee. It comes down to player perspective and whether he backs himself to change Maresca's mind. But it was really difficult pre-season for him. And again, it doesn't help, like I said before, that Malo Gusto's come over the left-hand side. So when I spoke to Enzo Maresca, he told me that Chilwell's a left back, which might seem like a very obvious thing to say, but the point of difference is he's not an option in Maresca's mind playing in left midfield or in a more advanced position. So if you know that you've got Cucurella, you've got Gusto, and you've seemingly got Renato Vega ahead of Chilwell in the pecking order, then he's in a really hard position. And I think even harder because even though Maresca was coy when I also asked him about it, I don't think he's going to invert the right side as much as he inverts the left. You might try both, but when Reece James is back, it makes way more sense to have James bombing forwards, which he prefers, adding width on the right side. And then if you've got Madueke or Palmer on that right-hand side or Neto, they've got an overlap and more freedom to cut inside. Whereas on the left-hand side, you've got a born inverted fullback in Cucurella. You've got a strong option in Gusto, left or right to invert, but left is where he was trialled in pre-season. You got Vega, who can do it like a duck to water because he's played as a centre-back and in central midfield, so he's very used to being on the ball more in a deeper position and cutting inside. And then your left winger has to really hug the touchline and stretch. And this is why, if you watch very carefully with Mudryk, Enzo Maresca is constantly, when he's not on the ball, gesturing to him, get white chalk on your boots, stay wide. And I was like in a really good position because the beauty of Stamford Bridge as a journalist is that you're really low and you're right in between the dugout. And I'm constantly seeing Maresca when there's a lull in play and players are used to just kind of like standing there and ambling and looking at the ball on the other side and timing their run. And Mudryk is kind of poised like a runner that's about to come out the blocks. He's got those sort of knees bent and he's like leaning forwards like he's trying to make a diagonal run, that he's trying to come in field, that he's trying to get to the back post, that he's hoping for a quick ball. And Maresca's there screaming at him saying, no, hold your position on that left-hand side and stay 5-6 yards wider. And that's because if the left-hand side is going to be inverted, the winger has to stretch for balance and hold the position. Because if you cut inside and your team are on the ball, then your inverted fullback and your left winger are too close and too central and too deep. Whereas if your inverted fullback is on the ball or someone around that area and your winger is on the left-hand side, they're an outlet, they're an option, but you can also use them as a decoy and you can switch the play. Conversely, if you're not on the ball and you're staying in a position where you're 5-6 yards in field and your inverted fullback is also in a more central position, then if they break quickly down that flank, their right, your left, then you're in a position where you're giving their wide players potentially on the counter-attack too much space. So he wants Mudryk to hold his position, but Mudryk's so desperate in his immaturity to be involved in the game that he's looking to press space, he's looking to get the ball, he's looking to cut inside. And Maresca's saying no. And again, it works better on that left-hand side to have a wide Mudryk or a wide Felix or a wide Neto and invert the left. And that's bad news for Ben Chilwell. Whereas if it was the other way around and the left side was just a standard fullback bombing forwards and the right side was Reece James or Malo Gusto inverting, there should be no reason why Ben Chilwell can't deal with that because it is just a more traditional fullback position. Yeah. So we don't know because he's trying both. But my read is that Ben Chilwell doesn't have as much of a future at the football club because in the long run, he wants that left fullback to be the inverted fullback, and he doesn't think that that suits Ben Chilwell as much.
So I'm going to go to a couple other big names, and then we're just going to kind of one-word rapid fire the rest because by my count, there are still
400,
including academy players who could move on loan, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 players on this list. So I don't want to spend 5 minutes on all of them here. Let's talk about Raheem because he is the next big name on my list after Ben Chilwell. Obviously, reports between him and United, him and Juve. Anything else to add on that front, Ben? As we look at a player who is going to be difficult to move, is probably going to have to accept different terms for his future club.
Yeah, two separate negotiations, one between Sterling and Chelsea and then one potentially, if it develops, between Manchester United and Raheem Sterling. The Manchester United side is led by Dan Ashworth. They're open to it on the right terms. And who knows, structurally it might be a loan and a loan with Sancho involved, or Sterling might agree something with Chelsea that makes it more viable to then go and join Manchester United. So we have to understand the Chelsea and Sterling negotiation, because at the time we're recording, it'll probably change when some of you are watching this, but at the time we're recording, Sterling's talking to Manchester United. Chelsea are talking to Manchester United. And when Aaron Wan-Bissaka left for West Ham, if you want a player to leave and you've got, including bonuses and wage, £70 million left on the contract, you say to that player, if you take a pay cut and leave, and we want you off the wage books, and we're saving in theory 70 million, but we'll give you 5 million, 10 million, and then you get a bump in wage, you get a settlement, you come out of your contract, or alternatively, you agree to reduce terms and we give you a payout, or you leave permanently and you get a number, whatever it is. It depends what the structure is. But either way, Sterling's likely, if he leaves, to get some money from Chelsea and some money from his new club in order to compensate him for the fact that he's leaving with a very lucrative Chelsea contract that's still got a long way to run. And people may say, well, if he agrees to Manchester United, why do we need to pay him anything? It's a sweetener and it makes it viable. And it might mean that Sterling drops his terms and then a suitor's able to get the deal done. And this is very normal in football. And if you think about it from Chelsea's terms, the other option is they don't offload Sterling and then they're stuck paying at least a year's salary, maybe more. So Chelsea will say, well, it's 70 million we owe him. If we pay him 10 million, we save 60. He finds a solution. We get the wage off the books. And then they might put that 60 on a Victor Osimhen or an Ivan Toney or towards Jadon Sancho. So it can be win-win. But again, Sterling has to negotiate with Chelsea. It has to be agreed with Manchester United. There's a lot of hurdles still to overcome. And if we were recording this on day one of the window, I would say, my God, it's stressful to get all of this done. I don't know how they're going to do it. It's very early stages. Nothing is guaranteed. But of course, you've got to work at super speed. So sod's law in the window. By the time people watch this, it might actually all be done. It can be either extreme. But I can guarantee you right now, Sterling hasn't spoken to Manchester United, so technically there's still a long way to go, but there's just a very short amount of time left in the window. So let's see whether it develops.
Quickly, Romelu Lukaku done to Napoli. Feeling confident about that?
Yeah, medical ongoing as we speak. He's already flown in. It's in Rome, I'm told, because there's better medical facilities. It threw me. Medical in Rome. I was like, wait a minute, he's going to Naples. But apparently you fly in, you do your medical in Rome, then you go and join Napoli. That's just how it works. So the expectation is that gets done. It's a 3-year deal. Now, you will see some conflicting reports over the fee as well. I'm told the best way of referring to it is the initial package is around 30 million. And then we wait and see on the add-ons or anything else as part of the deal. I think Chelsea always wanted 45 million. It ends up being that high, but I've been cautioned around specifically breaking down the fee now, even though sources originally reported it as 30 plus 15. And now I'm more confident in just saying that the total package of guaranteed is 30 million. And I think that is a deal that just suits all parties.
Last big one before we rapid fire is Armando Broja reports that, the Ipswich move is now kind of tabled, that he had a little bit of an Achilles problem in camp. And so maybe the medical wasn't so great for him. Everton obviously looming. They need a bunch of help. Where does Broja end up in 2 days' time? Yeah,
I think Ipswich is going to be pretty difficult at this stage because Chidozie Ogbene has joined, and that presumably means they're not going to add Broja as well. It was an Achilles problem. And as I reported, Broja had some reservations as well. So this was a loan with an obligation, but the obligation was only for Ipswich if they stayed up, contingent, crucially, on Broja agreeing terms. And normally in that scenario, the player pre-agrees terms, so the obligation is fixed. But in this scenario, Broja didn't pre-agree terms, and that results in a scenario where Ipswich could have stayed up. The obligation could have been triggered on the club side, but Ipswich could have said, we're going to offer you 0, or Broja could have said, even if you offer me $1 million a week, I'm not accepting it. And therefore, there was always an opt-out for Ipswich just to offer intentionally low terms. So Broja rejected, and then the obligation wouldn't have kicked in, or alternatively, Broja to say, sorry, whatever you offer me, I'm not going to accept. So it was kind of I don't know if this is the right way of phrasing it, but almost a fake obligation or a very loose obligation. And now, because of the Achilles problem, it is going to be difficult. If Calvert-Lewin leaves Everton, then Broja and Everton might be one to watch. And I still wouldn't discount my Leicester City. Now, when Dewsbury Hall was first being negotiated, Broja to Leicester was downplayed, with the player not necessarily wanting to make that move either. And Leicester and Ipswich might be quite similar, because there can be a scenario where Leicester go down in the same way that Ipswich might go down. Leicester get a points deduction. Right. So Broja had reservations, but we're so late in the window that he'll have reservations about staying at Chelsea too. So don't rule out Leicester being a late and a surprise suitor, because they, who have also looked at David Datro Fofana, are still hoping to strengthen with a striker. He's not the only option, but Broja's an option for Leicester. He's a dream at the moment for Everton, and they have been in negotiations, but they need an outgoing. And I think with Ogbene arriving at Ipswich, it is very likely now, even if it does just turn into a loan with an option, that maybe Broja to Ipswich is off.
All right, of the rest, and there are plenty on this list, it feels like Tino Andrin has officially departed, Leo Castledine on loan. Where does someone like Carney Chukwuemeka end up at the end of the window quickly? Is he at Chelsea, or is he on loan, or is he sold?
I think at Chelsea is the most likely at this stage. They've got so many other more pressing priorities. We know Milan have looked. There's interest, in fact, from more than one Serie A club. But I'm not aware of anything concrete at the time of recording. Maybe there's a late ploy. Maybe there's even a surprise Premier League suitor that thinks he's got top potential. Maybe there's a scenario I heard where if it was Duran and Chelsea returning for him, Aston Villa may say, we'll take him back on a loan deal because they rated him so highly when he was at the football club. But at this stage, we're really just talking about internal speculation from clubs, talking about Chukwuemeka if the right pieces fall. And I would not at all be shocked with time running out and Chelsea having to prioritise other players if actually Chukwuemeka and a possible exit is something that is repicked up in 2025.
Cesare Cassidy at Chelsea on loan or sold?
This one's open. He obviously played under Maresca at Leicester. No takers at this point. I think he might get an opportunity still at Chelsea to prove his worth in the Cups, with minimal cameos in the Premier League as well. So again, not aware of anything advanced. Leicester was the club that wanted to sign him permanently, but under Maresca, and Steve Cooper's cooled on making any kind of move, and Leicester have now gone in different directions as far as their midfield is concerned. So I can see also a realistic possibility where that's one that's either only a loan or he stays at Chelsea.
Lucas Bergstrom, goalkeeper.
Yeah, not aware of anything advancing at this point, but I think that is a viable transfer that does happen. Still think there's plenty of interest in him, and Chelsea have obviously got a lot of goalkeepers as well. And if it is Petrovic that stays, then I think Bergstrom needs to find a solution and will be aware of it. It will likely be a domestic loan or loan with option or maybe transfer. But I think the kind of caliber of clubs looking don't really have the means to pull anything off permanently. So loan with option, loan with obligation. Blackpool was the club that I heard a few days ago. Let's see whether anything develops.
What about Kellyman?
Well, Kellyman's been injured and hasn't really had a chance to integrate. The original plan was to loan him, or at least be open to that possibility. But right now, I think he might stay just because Maresca's not had the opportunity to look after his sort of development and give him a plan and see what he's capable of. So if Kellyman, because he's injured, stays, then maybe what you do is you integrate him, you give him some minutes, you get him fit, you judge him, and then you revisit a loan possibility in January. But obviously, if he does get loaned in a surprise move late in the window, then you're looking at straight loan, which is just common sense, of course, because they've only just signed him.
Angelo Gabriel.
Yeah, no real information on this at this stage. I think the original feeling was that he would end up being kind of linked back to Strasbourg. But right now, I think the Chelsea anticipation with Gabriel had changed from loan to sale. So they will explore options in the market, and it won't necessarily be a temporary move. I think we might be looking at a permanent move as well. Right now, I don't have a suitor for you or any advanced news to bring, other than to reiterate that Chelsea's position there had changed on the 19-year-old from a loan right at the beginning of the window, potentially within their group, to now being open to a permanent sale.
David Datro Fofana, Mark Guiu, your two striker options who may become like third, fourth string.
Guiu's really impressed, and I think Chelsea might keep him now. The original expectation, if a striker came in early to the pedigree of Victor Osimhen or Ivan Toney, was that Guiu might be loaned out, but he's done ever so well. He's like this sort of hulkish old school, brute, traditional striker, and they really like him. And right now, with no guarantee yet at the time of recording of Osimhen or Toney, I think he might just be part of the plans. And again, they may reconsider that one in January 2025. Loan isn't out of the question, but I'm not aware of anything advanced at this point. I think, by the way, Leicester would also take Guiu on loan. And I know that when Ipswich were asking about Amari Hutchinson, at that point, I can't remember if in the chronology Guiu was done or not specifically. So I don't know whether it was a conversation with Chelsea or whether it was actually still when he was at La Masia with that 6 million release clause. But Ipswich were very interested in Guiu. I suspect it was more at that point a conversation between them and Barca than them and Chelsea. But now they've got an Ogbene again. Not so sure that anything's going to develop there either. So yeah, Guiu could end up staying. David Datro Fofana is still available for sale, and Chelsea would like to find a permanent solution between now and the end of the window.
Any of the following: Zach Sturge, David Washington, Alex Matos, McNeely, Silcott Dewberry, any of these folks more likely loans than sales at this point?
Yeah, just solutions being looked at the moment, not a great deal developing at this stage, other than to say that with Alex Matos in particular, they are open to a loan or a sale. If it's to be a sale, I'm told that Chelsea are looking for between 8 and 10 million, which might be a little bit difficult for the pedigree of clubs that are looking at him, which I'm told are predominantly in the Championship. So a loan maybe to the second tier of English football, looking a little bit more likely at this stage, unless Chelsea drop their asking price. And then just a quick word on Harvey Vale as well, who does have an offer club to club from Steven Gerrard's Saudi side, Al Ittifaq, but there's no agreement at the time of recording on fee yet. So Al Ittifaq are looking to spend about 250,000 and do it permanently. And Chelsea are looking for 400,000 minimum, with add-ons maybe taking it a little bit closer to 800,000. So there's work to be done on the club-to-club side, but talks are advanced. And then Vale has to decide whether he's interested in that move or not. Gerrard is the manager. Dean Holden is the assistant manager. It's a relatively anglicised club in its backroom staff, but it's a big move. And there's no guarantee that gets done. It might sound strange that that fee is high to Al Ittifaq, but they're not one of the PIF-controlled clubs. So you might find at the end of the day, they move in a different direction. But Saudi sides can have 8 foreign players any age, and then 2 youngsters born in 2003 or later. And that allows them to suddenly move in a very niche market if they want the extra 2 foreigners. And this is why we're seeing Al Ittifaq and also Al Ali with Alexander, who joined from Fluminense, going in a direction where they're looking at 21 and unders. And that's where the Vale talks have started. And there is a concrete possibility that a package is agreed between Chelsea and Al Ittifaq, but it will then just fall upon Vale as to whether he wants to make that move. And people may say, well, why not do it? But you've got different language, weather, culture, and I can guarantee you, despite reports, that the money out there is not going to be as astronomical at a club like Al Ittifaq as some may suggest. It will be great money for him. It will be tax-free if he stays for 2 years. But you're not talking about 70, 80, 90, 100,000 a week tax-free or anything more than that. I think you're probably talking about a maximum of 40,000 a week at best. And that will have caveats based upon performance, based upon bonuses. So Vale's got a big decision to make, but I can confirm that the talks between Ittifaq and Chelsea are concrete.
Last question, and we'll save the what happens at the beginning of the season for Maresca till next time, just because the amount of players that we had to get through here. Ben, this is our last transfer special, so my last question for you is, assuming the best case scenario, Chelsea are able to offload the players that they need to offload, they're able to get the wage structure in place that they need to, and that, they have brought in all the players that they want to. Is there any chance that Chelsea will hit their PSR mark this year?
Yes, and I actually think they're already there. So I've been told that not only do they feel they're compliant with 23-24, but they feel they're okay for 24-25 as well, believe it or not. Now, that can change if there is anything big in terms of outlay, like if they somehow went nuts and triggered Osimhen's release clause or something. So there are a few things that can still move on the books. But as of now, their budgeting for 2024-2025 is compliant with PSR. So if they go above budget or something crazy happens, they have to adapt. But as of now, I think Chelsea are fine. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one is that the fees they've brought in the current cycle and in the forthcoming financial year are all going to be quite healthy. And it's not just what they've brought in this window. It's Mason Mount on the books for the last financial year. It's Club World Cup money that's likely to be a minimum of 40 million and can be put on this current calendar year. That money may triple if they go on and win the Club World Cup or advance to the latter stages. The financials are still being determined. And then, of course, we know in the previous year, the one that's just closed, there were the 2 sold hotels as well on their last set of books. In fact, that's on the last set of books that have just been declared. It gets confusing to people because when you see the figures, it's way after the year's shut. So we're talking about 22-23 hotel sales. And I'm told they've been approved, by the way. So the fair market valuation is fine and no major deduction has been made. Then you have the financial year that's just closed, 23-24, and the Mount sale is on that, plus some of this window. Then you have 24-25, of which you might get Sterling, you might get Chilwell, you've definitely got Lukaku. So all in, Chelsea's sales is a factor, as is the fact that, say, with Conor Gallagher, it's pure profit. And then with Joao Felix, it's amortization. So one is instantly on your annual books and the other has the transfer fee divided by the contract length. So that helps. And I accept that amortization lingers and all adds up. So if every amortized fee is tiny, but you've got 30 of them, then if each of them is 5 million, it's a lot of money to start with each annual year. But of course, after this current season and this financial year, PSR is likely to be replaced with a financial rule that is more similar to UEFA's squad cost control measure, and that will give Chelsea a bit more leeway. So it's all about just almost battling financially and being creative to get through this current financial year, ending on the 30th of June 2025, getting Champions League football back, and then Chelsea feel that they'll be absolutely fine. So we see a lot of bashing around how are Chelsea spending, but let's not forget that the monitoring cycle that closed in 22-23 has already been looked at by the Premier League and Chelsea haven't been charged. The monitoring cycle ending for the year 30th of June 2024, figures will be released in March 2025. And if Chelsea are charged, then we'll know that they've been overconfident about balancing the books. But if they're not charged in this season, in and around March, or whenever the Premier League privately see the figures, then I think we have to back the club's position that they're okay financially. Because if everyone keeps bashing Chelsea window after window, and at no point have they been charged under PSR, then it's very difficult to think that an investment firm that deal in billions like Clearlake Capital don't know what they're doing and don't know what the creative loopholes are. The bigger concern for me is what they've inherited from Roman Abramovich. And we know that between now and probably October, the Premier League will make a determination whether there are charges to be answered regarding historical potential financial breaches. And that's something more out of Chelsea's control. Because if they've inherited a breach and they've self-declared it, they'll have to accept to some extent the consequence of that, which is not a practice that they've engaged in, but the club will be held accountable. So I think I'm told there's more concern or intrigue as to what direction the Premier League are going to move in with the historical charges. But I'm told that Chelsea are satisfied with PSR for 23-24 and from a pre-budget point of view, 24-25. And for anyone in real layman's terms, even though I know Lukaku won't be profit compared to what they paid, Kepa won't be profit compared to what they paid if he ends up leaving permanently, but look at it in a simpler sense. If regardless of that, Chelsea were already okay for 22-23, then heading into 23-24, if they were already okay, regardless of whether players have left for profit or losses, if they were already okay, then if they go on to spend another 250 million, and at the end of this window, they balance that by bringing in around 250 million, if you factor in the Lukaku fee, maybe a Broja fee, maybe a Sterling fee, maybe a Chilwell fee, etc. It's all ifs, it's a lot of movement. But if they get there, then to some extent, they're kind of in the same position as far as their recruitment ins and outs are concerned, because the net spend is relatively close to zero. Now, net spend zero doesn't mean that you haven't lost on a player or you're not disappointed by a fee. But if you've basically got £1 in your bank balance heading into the summer, and then you spend £1 and you sell for £1 and you are happy with that pound and you're back to £1, then the net spend zero means that they're probably going to be okay again, even though there are caveats to that and it's a bit more complicated. So I think Chelsea are satisfied with these finances. And I think that there's a lot of scrutiny about the owners and the football side. But if there's one thing I think we can be quite confident that Clearlake know what they're doing with, it's money.
Well, let's wrap it there, Ben. Thank you for making this an extra long last kind of transfer windows. No, it's the player list that's extra long, unfortunately. So there's just a lot to get through. Last transfer special. We really appreciate your time all summer, and Chelsea fans, please go drop Ben some nice notes for all the reporting that he has done. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.